Hello, glad to see you on my channel. I really value it. And today I want to share with you a wonderful story. It's a dramatic story that will come as a total shock to everybody. It is a really amazing story. So enjoy watching it.
Elizabeth was often alone at home. She was so tired of it that she wanted someone to be there for her. Her mother was always at the office. She worked as a bookkeeper for the village council, so she often stayed there late. "Maddie, are you asleep?" A woman came into the house. No, she came out of her room. "Let's have dinner then." She set the groceries from her bag on the table. "Okay, why are you taking so long again today?" Elizabeth yawned. "Look, I get paid a salary for this. I need to make sure there are no mistakes." The woman didn't like the subject. "Good," her daughter agreed with her. They ate and then went to bed. In the morning, the girl had to go to school and her mother had to get up for work again. "Hi," Arnold met her on the road. "Hello," Elizabeth liked him. "How's it going?" He picked up the girl's briefcase. "Normal," she blushed. "Shall we go out tonight?" he asked simply. "Okay." They're already approaching the school porch. "Well, what did he say to you?" Katie's best friend came up to her. "Nothing." That one was still staring at the guy's back. "Well, Elizabeth, tell me, it was interesting." "It's okay that we're going out tonight," the girl admitted. "Did you say yes?" Katie was sure that Elizabeth was going to torture him for a long time. "Yeah, as long as I can. School will be over soon, he'll take off and leave, and I'll be left with my pride." She was sure of it. "Look at you, anyone would take you." My friend was sure of it. "Thank you for the compliment, of course, but I wish it was Arnold." She blushed again. They went to class, the lessons began, but Elizabeth did not care about them. She thought only about the young man. Classes dragged slowly, it was boring. Finally, everything was over. The girl went out into the schoolyard, but Arnold was not there. Waiting? Katie caught up with her. "Leave me alone, eh?" Elizabeth couldn't stand her friends teasing any longer. She went home, had lunch, and decided to do her homework. She couldn't think of anything to do, and she looked out the window every now and then. When it was 6 o'clock in the evening, he came in. At first Elizabeth wanted to run out to meet him, but after a moment she thought it would be rash. She sat back in her chair. There was a knock on the window. Elizabeth looked out, smiled, and shook her head, indicating that she was about to come out. "Hi," he grinned from ear to ear. "Why so happy?" She was shy, but she spoke confidently. "He saw you." He didn't hide the fact that he liked the girl. "Let's go." She smiled and tugged his hand. They went to the bank of the river, which was a favorite place for young people. But Arnold and Elizabeth didn't want anyone to see them, so they decided to go further, to a fisherman's cottage, which had been abandoned for a long time. "Come here." He gave her a hand to keep her from falling through on the bridge, where the boards were already rotten. "Thank you." She jumped to the ground, and fell right into his arms. Now he went to the door and tried to open it, but nothing worked. Then Arnold took a piece of iron that was lying on the ground, slipped it under the boards, pounded on it, and the door failed. "Wow," was all Elizabeth could say. They went inside. The place smelled musty. There were old nets around, some rags, some mattress. "Come here," the boy beckoned her. They laid the mattress against the wall, threw some other stuff on it, and made themselves comfortable. There was a small window opposite where they were sitting, with a view of some of the trees and the sky. Beautifully, Elizabeth sat in Arnold's arms. "Like you," he whispered it in her ear. "What?" She laughed, and turned to him. "You're beautiful." He touched her hair, which was disheveled from its ponytail. Their faces were very close together and Arnold couldn't resist. He kissed Elizabeth. "You what?" She recoiled from him, blushing. "I love you." He held her hands. "What are you talking about? What kind of love can there be at our age?" She said it, and she didn't want him to let her go. "Come to me." he pulled her to his chest again. She could smell him, she liked him. Arnold stroked her head, her back, her neck, they were pleasant touches. "I'll never leave you," he whispered to her. "I love you," she answered him. They lay like that on the old mattress for a long time, Arnold holding her, and Elizabeth drowning in that embrace. "Time to go home," he kissed her. Yes, she stood up, shook it off, looked at him and smiled. They left the cabin, closed the door so that it would appear that this was the way it was. Arnold walked with Elizabeth to her house. For now, he stepped close to her and set it into her hair. "Arnold," she hugged him. "See you tomorrow," he kissed her on the cheek, as if he was afraid someone would see. Elizabeth walked home, she couldn't believe all that had happened. Her body was burning, still remembering Arnold's kisses. "Why are you like this?" Her mother looked at her. "Which one?" The girl didn't understand. "I don't know," the woman shrugged. "You don't know, so don't say so." The girl was embarrassed, she felt like everyone could see and understand what had happened to her today. She lay on the bed, and thought about her boyfriend. It had never felt so good. She thought it would be a lifetime. Now, they would graduate from high school, a whole different life would begin. Arnold would be the boss of their family and home. "Hi," he caught up with her the next day as she was walking to school. "Hello," she approached him, but the guy didn't hug her for some reason. Later, he looked around again. "I feel like you're embarrassing me," she was offended. "What are you talking about?" He took her hand. They arrived at the school, Arnold went to his friends again, and Elizabeth remained standing near the porch. "Hi," Katie came up behind me. Startled, her friend turned to her. "Why are you so frightened? Am I so scary?" Laughed the girl. "Oh, Katie, don't start." Elizabeth looked over to where her lover stood. "What, with him?" The girlfriend was also looking in the same direction as Elizabeth. "Look at him, isn't he handsome?" she said fondly. "That's it, friend, I see we've lost you, you're gone," Katie concluded. The bell rang, and all the boys entered the school building. The bell rang and all the boys entered the school building. Elizabeth remembered her feelings, which she had experienced the day before. It was inexpressible. When the lessons were over, she hurried to the exit, she did not want the guy to leave without her. But, she didn't have time, because Arnold was nowhere to be found. "What, he's already gone?" Laughed her friend behind her back. "Katie, leave it alone." It hurt Elizabeth that he hadn't waited for her. She wandered home alone. But when she had only a few meters to go, she heard someone calling her name. "Why are you hiding here?" She approached the bushes from where Arnold had called her. "I'm not hiding, I'm waiting for you," he sounded offended. "There she is, me," she spun around in front of him. "Come here," he beckoned her to him. Now, Elizabeth looked around and skirted to where her boyfriend was. "Samato, why are you looking around?" He laughed. "Shut up," she blushed again. Yes, she realized now what Arnold was so embarrassed about. The village was small, everyone knew each other. She didn't want anyone telling her mother about them. "Shall we?" He winked at her. "Okay, let's at least leave the bags at home." She looked at her large briefcase. Okay, they walked down the path that led to the girl's house, threw the load there, and headed for the cabin where they had spent time yesterday. "Sorry," he tucked a strand behind her ear as they lay on the same mattress again. It was okay, she liked being around him so much, she would always like that. "Would you like to be my wife?" The young man asked, he leaned back. "Would you take it?" She doubted it. First of all, they were still young, and secondly, they had only been dating for a couple of days. "Why not? We'll finish school, go somewhere, and then we can think about marriage," he said dreamily. Elizabeth realized that it would all be, not so soon, so she forbade herself to think. He turned to her and hugged her, she brought her face close to his. "You're so beautiful," he started kissing her. Love you, she responded to those kisses. Again today they spent the whole day in their hiding place. Elizabeth could come and go freely from the house without anyone knowing where she was or with whom she was. Her mother, as always, was very busy, so her daughter did what she wanted. That's it, bye, see you tomorrow, they said goodbye at her gate. Mom, the girl entered the house, but there was silence in response. They started dating Arnold. Elizabeth didn't need any girlfriends, parties and discos anymore. She wanted to be only with him, and she saw nothing else. Why don't you get up? Her mother came up to her in the morning. I can't, it's bad, I feel sick, Elizabeth replied. Seeing that she was very pale, her mother touched her head. Not going to school today, Elizabeth leaned her head off the bed, she spun around. Good, petted her mom. The woman left, and Elizabeth remained lying in bed. There was only one pity, she would not meet Arnold. But the girl was wrong, he was already at her house in the afternoon. Elizabeth, he shouted at the gate. She heard him, but she couldn't even get up to open it. The lad did not hesitate, stuck his hand in the hole, pulled the deadbolt, and entered the yard unhindered. Are you home? He was already in the kitchen. Come in, he heard from the room where the girl lay. What's wrong with you? He could see she wasn't feeling well. I don't know, she lay on her back, but at that moment an attack of nausea came up to her throat again. Sit with you. He came closer. If it's not too much trouble for you, it was immediately different with him. The nausea receded a little, even the pallor went away. He crouched on the edge of the bed, took Elizabeth's hand in his, it was cold. Why are you shivering? He was worried about her. I can't tell, she looked up at him. Maybe a doctor. He was ready to run to the nurse's station. No, don't, it'll get worse, I'll go myself, she stopped him. They sat like that until the evening. The girl felt better, she even got up and drank tea. I have to go, Arnold hugged the girl. Elizabeth continued to study, sometimes she felt as bad as she did that time. Don't you think you eat too much? My mother asked me one night. Mom, are you going to reproach me with food? My daughter couldn't believe it. No, look how fat you've gotten, the woman pointed to her waist area. Elizabeth noticed it herself, her favorite skirts and dresses didn't fit her. She was nervous about it, but she put it down to the fact that she had been eating more lately. And you cook not so good, laughed the girl. That's what you said, the mother didn't think about anything else at all. But, by spring, it became apparent that this fullness was for a reason. Come here, her mother called her then. What? Her daughter came up to her. The woman pulled up the dress her daughter was wearing. There's a reason my neighbor told me that, the woman clutched her head. Mom, what are you talking about? Elizabeth looked at her and at her stomach. Don't you understand anything, you idiot? She jabbed her finger. No, why? Elizabeth began to suspect something wrong, but she was afraid to even think about it. Where did you get it? The woman asked. Mommy, cried the girl, she crouched down on a stool that stood nearby. What mom? Hugged her daughter and she cried. Arnold, Elizabeth didn't look at her. Bring him here, you students too, the woman resented. Presently, the girl put on her shoes and left the house. I don't understand what happened, dragging Arnold by the hand to her house. You'll understand now, Elizabeth was angry with him. Well, son-in-law, what are we going to do? The woman stood with her hands at her sides. What kind of son-in-law am I to you? He looked at Elizaveta, he was scared. And who else, you'll have a child soon, she pointed at her daughter. What? He sat down and covered his eyes with his hands. How can I now look my neighbors in the eyes, they will say that I with my work in general abandoned my daughter, screamed the woman. I don't know how that could have happened, Arnold was confused, he didn't know where to take his gaze. But I know how to hit on girls, so he knows, but how to answer for it, she didn't finish. And what to do now? The guy was talking to Elizabeth's mother as if she wasn't even here. What to do, a wedding to play, said the mother firmly. But, we're still in school, he stood up again. As to do anything, so about school did not remember, the woman went to her room. How? He whispered to Elizabeth. Silently, she was shocked at everything that was happening. It was necessary to inform his parents, but how to do it, the guy absolutely did not know. He didn't want to go home that day. But he didn't have to say anything to anyone. When Arnold entered the house, his mother and father were sitting in the kitchen, waiting for him. You already know. Guessed the guy. How could you? You've ruined the girl's life and your own. The mother was determined, but now she couldn't help it, and cried. Enough, what are you all talking about? I'll take her as my wife, we'll have a baby, we'll have a real family. He wanted to go to his room, but his father stopped him. Where will you live? He held his son's hand. We'll figure it out, the guy didn't want to talk about it. He'll figure it out, the man exhaled. From that day on, the whole village talked about the incident. Each time the news became more and more interesting. Elizabeth was no longer pregnant by Arnold, but by someone else. And he just took pity on her, took her under his wing. The girl's mother agreed with the chairman, and he agreed to marry the young people. It so happened that at the graduation ceremony it was no longer a boy and a girl, but a husband and a wife. You will live here, Elizabeth's mother said sternly. Okay, that was even better for the girl. I'm going to try to get a job, Arnold said one day. All plans to study in the city and move there had been postponed, and maybe they were never meant to come true. At first, the boy built himself up as a family man. A healthy girl was born, whom the parents named Maidie. The husband brought money into the family, and tutored his daughter. But when he received the summons, his joy and zeal diminished. How can it be, perplexed Elizabeth, how can I be alone? She cried every day. But, they had no way to influence this situation. Arnold left to serve. It's going to be hard, her mom told her. I understand it myself, Elizabeth was afraid to be alone. But Arnold's parents and her mother helped her with everything. Maddie grew up an active child, she was always busy with something. Elizabeth looked at her and realized that she was still a child herself, but she had her own. She wrote letters to her husband in the army, and he wrote back, but unlike Elizabeth, he did so very rarely. He came back when his daughter was over 2 years old. He didn't recognize her at first. Arnold, it's been so long since we've seen each other, Elizabeth snuggled up to him. So much for the callow tenderness, he turned away from her. When he came to the army, he saw that it was possible to live differently, not like they did in the village. Now he wanted something different. He regretted the way things had turned out between him and Elizaveta. If he could turn back the clock now, he wouldn't look at her at all. Stop sitting here, his mother-in-law told him. Wanting and sitting down, he poured himself another shot. Your wife and child are bored here without you, and here you are, she stood and berated him. I need to get used to it, he said, realizing that he no longer had any feelings for his wife. What's this about? My mother didn't understand. To everything, snapped the young man. Oh, it's all clear with you, you don't need it, so be brave, get up and leave. She went to the room where her granddaughter was sleeping. And that's what I'm going to do, Arnold freaked out. He got up from his stool, staggered, picked up his papers, and walked out of the house. Mom, where's Arnold? Elizabeth came back from the store. Gone, the one said calmly. I didn't get it, now it was the girl's turn to be surprised. Said he needed to get used to you, I pointed at the door, the woman was minding her own business. How could you do that? Cried Elizabeth. Don't cry, there's no need to cry for him, he didn't deserve it. He spoiled a girl, gave birth to a child, and went into the bushes. He didn't like it, apparently, the woman came up and hugged her daughter. What about us? She didn't understand, tears rolling from her eyes. Nothing, you are still young, you will find a groom, she wiped her daughter's tears. The paperwork had to be done. When 6 months passed and Arnold never returned, Elizabeth decided to divorce him. Her mother helped with everything. It was interesting why Arnold's parents stopped communicating with their former daughter-in-law and granddaughter. But no one asked them about it. You know what, one night mom and daughter were sitting at the table, Maddie was running around. What? Elizabeth looked at the woman. Go to the city, go to school, get an education, get a job, maybe you'll find a normal husband, her mother reasoned. What about Maddie? She looked at her daughter. Why, she will stay with me for the time being, and you, when you have done everything, will come back for her at once, bent down and took her granddaughter in her arms, the grandmother bent down and took her in her arms. Good, I also thought about it, but I did not dare to say, I thought, if you do not agree, Elizabeth hugged her mother. Once everything was agreed upon, that was the end of it. Elizabeth gathered all her documents and set out to conquer the city. Everything was new there, it was not often necessary to get out of the village. The girls submitted documents, entered, she was provided with a dormitory, moved in. When she lived with her mother and daughter, she did not think that there was such a strong connection between them. But now, when she was alone in a strange city, she felt the lack of relatives. Why are you so sad? Victoria, her roommate, sat down next to her. Missing my daughter, she placed a picture on the table. Wow, so young, and already such a big daughter, surprised the girl. Yes, but I don't regret anything, Elizabeth stroked Maddie's image. Don't be sad, sometimes you have to make sacrifices, the neighbor gave wise advice. I'm trying, she got up, went to the light switch to turn out the lights. Studying was not difficult, Elizabeth did it with pleasure. She prepared for her subjects, cracking problems like peanuts. By the end of the session there was almost no need to take exams, everything was set automatically. Home for the holidays? Victoria asked. Yes, missed you very much, can't wait to get together. Elizabeth wanted to go shopping for a doll for her daughter and then go. Come on, see you later, they hugged. There were a lot of people in the store, everyone wanted to please children on this fabulous holiday. I'm sorry, Elizabeth felt like she'd stepped on someone's foot. Just shine today, the man looked down at his shoes. I didn't do it on purpose, Elizabeth really didn't mean it. She pulled a handkerchief out of her pocket, wanting to remove her mark from the victim's shoes. You what? He grabbed her arm. Sorry again, couldn't find any other words, girl. Come on, he took her to where there were the least people. Why? She didn't understand what this man wanted from her. Now, he sat down, dusted his boots a couple times with some kind of rag, and everything was as it had been before. I should probably go, Elizabeth looked to see that there weren't as many customers at the register. Wait, I'm with you, he rose. Okay, she's already headed that way. My name is Michael, what's yours? Elizabeth heard from behind her. Elizabeth, she didn't turn around at that. Buying a doll for your sister? He pointed at the beautiful toy in the girl's hands. To my daughter, waiting for me for the holidays at Grandma's, she didn't mince words. Wow, Michael didn't continue. He was also buying something, and when he went outside, he saw that Elizaveta had crossed to the other side. He caught up with her. Can I walk you out? He walked beside me. I think you're already doing that, she smiled. Elizabeth thought to herself, how could you just step on a man's foot in a store, and the next moment you had already made an acquaintance? She liked Michael, he was solid, in a coat, with a briefcase and an umbrella. Yeah, are you going somewhere? He looked at the large bag in her hand. Yes, I live in the village, and now I am studying here. For the holidays I decided to visit my mother and daughter, Elizabeth spoke casually. Let me help you, he held out his hand to take the bag. Thank you, she really was grateful, because the luggage was heavy. They reached the train station, stopped. "Elizabeth, will we meet again?" "He'd like that very much." "Why not?" She saw her bus pulling up. "Then tell me where you live in the city, I'll be sure to come." He looked in the same direction she did. "Yes," she nodded and dictated the address to him. "Before we met," he stood looking at her through the bus window. "Bye," the girl said with just her lips. On the road, she looked at the flickering trees, but did not see them, thinking about her new acquaintance. Finally, the familiar outlines of houses appeared ahead, a smile appeared on the girl's face. She imagined how Maddie would meet her now. She got off the bus and headed towards her house. Everything was familiar here. Elizabeth greeted the locals along the way. She was already at her gate when she saw Arnold. "Hi," he approached her. "What are you doing here?" She didn't want to talk to this man. Wanting to ask how he was doing, the girl could see he wasn't sober. She pushed him away a little, and walked through the gate. He didn't dare follow her. "Daughter, hello," a woman came out on the porch. "Why, did you come to meet me on purpose?" Elizaveta couldn't understand. "No, I thought your ex-husband was gonna bang again," she pointed to the gate. "Wasn't this the first time?" The girl was very surprised why no one had told her this before. "Yes, sorry I didn't tell you." The mother walked into the house, waiting for her daughter to catch up with her. And what he needed here, different thoughts about the baby and everything else immediately began to pop into his head. "Nothing, a drink or money for a bottle," she heard the answer to her question. "Wow," Elizabeth stood up and froze. There was no telling how long she would stand like that, and what she would think about. "Mom," there was a hurricane coming at her from the room. "Maddie, hey," she hugged her. "Why were you gone so long?" The girl clung to her mother's neck with a deadly grip. "I'm sorry, love, but we'll be together soon," she knew for sure we would be. "Okay, granddaughter, let mommy pass," took her in her grandmother's arms. "I missed you so much," Elizabeth looked at her mother. "Yes, let's go to the table." They all sat there together. "Well, are you ready for the holiday?" Elizabeth leaned over to the child. "No, we don't even have a Christmas tree," the little girl said sadly. "It's okay, we'll find her today." Her mom kissed her. "Yay!" Started bouncing around the kitchen. As Elizabeth had promised, she bought a small Christmas tree. They set it up in the room, decorated it with toys, and now the holiday felt real. "And the presents?" The girl looked under the tree. "Wait, Santa Claus hasn't made it to our house yet," Elizabeth laughed. At night she prepared everything, packed it all nicely, and tomorrow, as soon as they sat down at the table, she would put it all under the festive tree. Everything went as Elizabeth had planned. Her daughter was so happy with the doll that she did not sit at the table at all. And when the women came into the room, they only smiled when they saw her sleeping with the new toy in her arms. "So, how are things going in town?" the woman asked, so they could talk to each other at last. It was okay, there really wasn't much to tell. She didn't want to talk about the last encounter, because nothing was clear. They raised their glasses, congratulated each other, and drank. After the party, they put the dishes away and went to their room. "Well, it's time for me to go back to school. Elizabeth has been home for a week." "May all be well," mother and daughter hugged her. "I'm going to miss you very, very much," cried the girl. Just like me, Elizabeth didn't want to cry, but a single tear slid treacherously down her cheek. That was it, her mother took her by the hand, and went to walk her to the gate. "Bye," headed the girl towards the station. Everything in the dormitory was the same as before, nothing had changed in the week they hadn't been there. They had to start studying again. "Elizabeth, there's someone there to see you," one of the female students came into her room. "Thank you," she speculated who it might be. When the girl came downstairs, she saw Michael, as she expected. Today he was wearing a tracksuit, which was very suitable for a young man. Yes, young. It was the first time Elizabeth had seen him in an overcoat and thought he was a man. Hi, she approached him. He couldn't wait for all these celebrations to be over. He looked up, the janitor was standing there watching them. He gave Elizabeth a hand, and looked at the exit. The girl immediately understood everything. She said that she had to change, and in a minute she would be outside. And so it was agreed. Where are you going? Victoria stood looking at her. Elizaveta didn't usually leave the dormitory at all. I'll tell you all about it later, the roommate said, embarrassed. She grabbed her jacket, put on her shoes, and went out into the hallway. Michael stood on the porch. Okay, I'm ready, she walked over to him. I'm very happy about that, he looked her over from head to toe. They walked just down the street, and when they reached a bench that stood in the shade of a tree, they decided to sit down and talk. I can't explain it, but there in the store, when you stepped on my foot, I liked you right away, Michael began to say. Of course, I can't say that, I was very scared at the time. She didn't look at him, but later, I can say that she paid attention to you too. They sat there like two schoolboys who couldn't admit their feelings to each other. On the one hand, it was funny, but on the other hand, it was only the second time they had seen each other. Can we go to the movies tomorrow? He asked her. All right, Elizabeth, something to think about. How long have you been a student here? He wanted to know more about her. 6 months, for some reason she felt ashamed of that answer. Why do you answer like that? He couldn't understand. Many people in my group say I'm a late entrant. But I think it's never too late to learn. Elizabeth pulled some wrappers out of her pocket and fiddled with them. Why do you even think about it? When you got in, then you got in. Maybe you didn't get the education you wanted and now you're retraining. He didn't understand what the problem was. They chatted some more, walked around the city, and Michael went to see her off, because Elizabeth said she still had some studying to do. Don't forget the movie, he told her on the porch. Sure enough, she walked into the dorm, cheeks burning, up to her room. Tell me, were you on a date? Victoria sat down to her at once. Yes, on a date, she told her cryptically. So, who is he? Where did you meet him? The roommate was all interested. Elizabeth told her how they had run into each other in the store, and after that, Michael had already recognized her. Well, wow, as it happens, some people go to bars, restaurants, clubs, cannot meet anyone, and you just stepped on his foot in the store, she laughed. Oh Victoria, don't be silly, nothing is known yet. Elizabeth didn't want to rush things. Michael came every day, it was very pleasant. He was clever, and Elizabeth liked to talk to him about different topics. When the heat came, the girl planned to go to her village again, because there were long holidays ahead. Are you sure you don't want to take me with you? Michael asked her. Do you really want it? She didn't know what to do or how to be. You know, I'm the kind of person who, if I do something, I do it thoroughly. If I choose you, I want to do it once, and for life. He took her hands in his, turning her to face him. So you want to go to my village now to meet my mom? She concluded. How clever you are, he kissed her. Okay, let's go, they've arranged for tomorrow where they'll meet. Elizabeth was very worried. What are you so worried about? Victoria asked her tonight. It's not every day you bring your fiancé and mom to meet, she said. So what's the big deal? You know, he's nice. Or what are you worried about? My friend didn't understand. How will Maddie take all this? Elizabeth sighed. Yes, she'll take it all normally, the man is adequate, the girl should like him, let him buy her candy, that's all it takes, Victoria advised. Well, your words to God. Elizabeth adjusted the pillow, and lay down. Sleep couldn't come for a long time because there were different thoughts in her head. But eventually she fell asleep in the morning. She went to her classes, and after them she could go to the train station. Elizabeth saw from afar that Michael was already sitting there, waiting for her. Various thoughts came into her head again. How she would bring him to the village, what she would tell her mother, because she had never told about any young men, and now immediately the groom came. But, since it was already decided, it had to be done. "Here I am," she approached him from behind. "And I'm waiting for you." He stood up and put his arm around her. "So, are you really ready to go to my mom's?" She asked him that question again. "Of course, why do you ask every time?" He couldn't understand. They got on the bus, drove off, talked a lot on the way. Elizabeth showed him different places where she had been, beautiful views of the river. She promised him that when everything blooms, you'll see how beautiful it will be. They were pulling into the station when Elizabeth noticed Maddie, and for some reason she got even more excited. Just as they were getting off the bus, Michael heard her. "Mommy, Mommy," the little girl ran to her. "Hi honey," she sat down and hugged her daughter. "How are you here?" "Grandmother said that there are long holidays ahead and you'll probably come to us, so we came to meet you," the girl gibbered. Suddenly, she stopped, and shifted her gaze to Michael. "Meet Michael, this is Michael," her mom told her. "Hi, Uncle Michael," she extended her hand to him. "Hi," he told her and pulled a candy bar out of his pocket. "Oh thank you, I just love those," she said. All this time Elizabeth's mother stood aside and watched the scene. Of course, she did not interfere in her daughter's affairs, deciding that later, when there was time, they would talk privately. "Michael, I'd like you to meet my mom," she motioned him over to the woman. Pleased, he extended his hand to her. "Me too," she shook it. After that, everyone went home. It was so peaceful for some reason. "Juliet, I'm here for a reason," Michael said that evening as they gathered around the table. "I've already realized that," the woman glanced at her daughter. "I like Elizabeth very much, and I would like her to be my wife." He reached into his inner pocket, and took out a ring. "Wow," and silent, Elizabeth stared at the gift. "Is Uncle Michael gonna be my daddy?" Running around Maddie. Anything is possible, Elizabeth slipped the ring on her finger. They sat there, the mother put her hand on her head, sat there, watching, seeing how happy her daughter was. Then she left them at home and went to a friend's house. "You have a good mom," Michael told Elizabeth. "Yes," she put the girl on her lap. "So, baby, shall we get to know each other?" He tickled her. "Yes," laughed the one. This time the couple could stay here for only 3 days. After that Elizaveta had to go to school and Vazia to work. "Maddie, now your mother's vacation will come and we will surely come for you," the young man crouched down in front of her. "Yay, and I get to live with you." She was glad for something that hadn't happened yet. "Yes," he raised his eyes to Elizabeth. That's how it worked out. When the girl passed the last exam, they went together again to pick up their daughter. The mother was so much upset. After all, when Elizaveta went to study, she had to quit her job. And now they were leaving her alone. "Don't feel bad, you can always come visit us," hugged her daughter. Good, her mother knew she was sure to visit them many more times. Michael moved Elizabeth back to his place, and they brought Maddie there, too. Now they had a full-fledged family. All that was left was to get their passport stamped. "Are you happy?" Michael asked her when they had been together for a month. "Very much so," she hugged him. Time flew by quickly. Elizabeth finished her studies, got a job. Maddie went to kindergarten. Michael and Elizabeth were happy that they had such a beautiful daughter. Yes, a daughter, because Maddie almost immediately started calling Michael Daddy. He didn't mind it, but he didn't give up hope that they would have a child together. "Today is an important day," my father said as he put on his suit in the morning. "My place or yours?" Maddie was getting the hang of it. "Of course you have, but it's not so easy for us either." He sat down in front of his daughter, adjusted her jacket, helped her put on her briefcase. "That's it, let's go." Elizabeth joined them. In her hands was a huge bouquet that consisted of asters and gladioli. They were going to the line, which was the first in the girl's life. Elizabeth was a little worried, and Maddie, on the contrary, was interested in everything. School life is not easy, but it concerns not only children, but also their parents. "How are things going at work?" Michael asked his wife. "It's fine, why do you ask?" She was making pies in the kitchen. "You look tired," he helped make the stuffing. "No, it was okay, it was just a lot of hassle with Maddie," and it was true, the kids had so much to do at school that their mother couldn't keep up with everything. "Why didn't you say anything? I can help." He was willing to do anything to make the family happy. Then see today what they are doing there. The girl was already in the 4th grade, she was bright, but still did not understand a lot. Only after a deep understanding of the topic she did everything correctly. Good, it was mutual in their family, each helping the other. "Maddie, get up, you'll be late for the dance," her mother shouted from the kitchen. "Can I not go today?" The girl was in 7th grade, she used to go everywhere without reservation, now she started to be stubborn. "No, it won't work like that, like going out with your girlfriends, then you are always ready, here too you have to try." Elizabeth walked into the room and looked at her daughter. "Okay," reluctantly she got up. "There, that's better," went the mom, giving her daughter time to change. Maddie was going to the dance class, which she had grown tired of. She'd been going since 1st grade, and now that everyone was older, she didn't want to waste any more time on it. "Maddie, where are you going?" Her friends greeted her. "To the dance," she rolled her eyes. "Let's go for a walk." "Why do you need them?" they urged her. "Ah, okay, it's okay to skip once." She looked around as if she was afraid her mother was watching her. They gathered in one of the courtyards, because there was also a group of older guys there. They didn't pay attention to the girls, but they still came to them every day. "Hi," walked Maddie and her friends past the young men. Yeah, they didn't even turn around, they weren't interested in the little ones. "Why don't they even look in our direction?" asked Sasha, who liked Pierce. "Because they have other interests," Maddie answered her. The girls didn't waste the opportunity, they were in that yard every day. "Come here," Arthur beckoned to Maddie. "What?" She didn't expect to be called. The school year was almost at an end, with only a few days left until vacation. "Go on, come on," her girlfriends whispered to her. The girl walked, her legs beginning to shake. Arthur was only a few meters away, but it seemed to her that he was miles away from her. When finally Maddie was close by, the boy laughed. "Did you call me here to laugh?" She didn't understand, and somehow her courage came at once. "No, it's just, you're shaking like a leaf." He took her hand. "I can't help it," Maddie was telling the truth. "Okay, let's go, there's business to attend to." He beckoned her over to the others. "Hey," she came over. "Listen," without greeting the guys started talking, "we need you to come to the disco with us." "Why?" The girl realized they had some kind of plan. "Our girls decided that we couldn't find anyone else, they blew us off, so we'll show them that we don't care," they explained to her. She turned to her friends and waved for them to come over to her. They were just waiting for that. They were there at the same moment. Maddie recounted the story to them. "We agree, those have already imagined that they will come to the disco with them, how their classmates will be jealous. Then it's settled, we'll see you here on Saturday." Arthur looked at Maddie and smiled. She must have fallen in love with him at that very moment. "Maddie, I found out you've been skipping the dance." Her mother came to her room. "Did your teacher call you?" The girl didn't understand. "There is one class left before the end of the year, at least go to it," the woman requested. "And I won't go from September?" she asked the woman. "We'll see," Elizabeth quipped. On Saturday, the girls had been at Maddie's house practically since lunchtime. They were putting on makeup, picking out what to wear. "Man, it doesn't seem too bright," turned to her friends Maddie. No, it was fine, they approved of what she did. But the girls still cleaned up a little of the makeup with wipes. Finally they were ready. It was still more than 2 hours before the event started, so everyone gathered in the same courtyard. Hi, the guys finally came, now they were chatting like old friends. Let's go. Maddie glanced at Arthur. Yep, he smiled at her. Maddie walked up to him and took him under her arm. It was very cool for her. Arthur was in charge of the company, and now she was walking beside him. Why so much makeup? The guy asked on the way out. Yeah, I knew it, she regretted not cleaning as much as she wanted, listened to her friends. Ahead showed the DK, where the disco was held. My knees began to tremble. What if your girls start fighting with us? Maddie asked, for some reason that had just occurred to her. They won't, and if they do, we're always there for them, he answered her. Good, she believed Arthur could handle everything. That night was just as the guys had planned. Those girls were only a year older than Maddie and her friends. As soon as they saw that they had come with their friends, they started talking. When Maddie went outside, they hurried to be there too. You're aware they're ours, one of the girls said. It was yours, now it's ours, Maddie didn't hesitate to say. They bickered some more, and then went back into the hall. A slow dance began. Arthur approached Maddie, and they danced, her eyes glittering as she saw the rival's eyes glaze over. Let's get out of here, the guy called out to her. What about the girls? She looked at her friends. Not little ones, they'll get there on their own. He looked to the same place as the girl. Okay, choosing between the girls and the guy, she favored him. They went outside, it was warm. Maddie took the boy's arm again, and they headed toward where the market had been during the day. Let's sit here, he beckoned her over to the tray and stood across from her himself. Good, she liked the way he treated her. You're cool, he touched her. You too, she smiled, she felt good now. What if we start being friends? He suggested. Come on, she couldn't believe she was saying that. Come on, I'll walk you out now, and tomorrow come to the yard. He gave her a hand to help her get down from where she was sitting. The next day, as promised, he was waiting for her where they always met. Maddie, are you really dating? Her friends looked at her in surprise. Yes, he suggested it himself yesterday, she told them. She looked down on them as if she was looking down on them. All right, I'm gonna go. Maddie headed in Arthur's direction. The girls kept up. They believed that if their girlfriend started hanging out with a guy like that, they might get lucky too. Hi, she approached him. What were you standing there so long with them? He asked about his friends. Talking about you, she told him honestly. A boy and a girl began a serious relationship. Now they rarely sat in this courtyard as a group. More often Arthur came to pick up Maddie and they went for walks. Who's that guy visiting you? Her mother asked her once. His name is Arthur, we've been friends for a couple months now, she blushed as she mentioned this to her mother. Why don't you bring him to visit, introduce him? The woman was afraid because the guy was 5 years older. I don't know, it's not time yet, she shrugged. Why are you picking on her? Michael intervened in their conversation. Well, how come? I'm a mother, I need to know who my daughter is socializing with. Elizabeth didn't understand him. Your daughter is 13 until she's old enough to choose her own suitors, we'll change them more than once, laughed Michael. It's good for you to reason, you don't worry like I do, she sighed. Now Elizabeth began to watch her daughter more carefully, she was afraid that a grown-up boy could do something. But Arthur showed himself on the good side, the girl always came home on time. At school she studied well, and so, after some time, Elizabeth let go of this situation. At school there was an autumn ball and, of course, after it disco. Will you come? Maddie asked Arthur. You're inviting me? I didn't feel like going to school, but if his girl's going, he should be with her. When they got there in the evening, they saw that the girl with whom the boy had once been friends was also there. Maddie was dancing in a circle with her friends and suddenly she felt someone pushing her back. She turned around and saw Nadia, Arthur's ex. What do you want? She asked her. And there's nothing to look at other people's boyfriends, much less be friends with them, she replied. You broke up, we started being friends, what's the big deal? Maddie didn't understand. We didn't break up, I just wanted to teach him a lesson, and you see how it turned out, the girl said haughtily. Well, who did you teach a lesson to, yourself? Laughed Maddie. Things were getting so heated between them that things were heading for a fight. Fuck you, she said to Nadia, and pushed at her shoulder. She grabbed her by the hair, and a real scuffle broke out. Nadia's friends wanted to protect her friend, but the girls who were with Maddie didn't stand still either. Arthur stood aside and only smiled at that. The whole situation was funny. After the teachers who were on duty at the disco had separated them, Maddie approached Arthur. Are you laughing? She asked him. He replied. Yeah, and fuck you. She turned around and headed for the exit. Wait, he followed her, but Maddie didn't want to listen to him. She was shaking with anger, not at the fact that she'd just gotten into a fight, but at having to fight over some guy. She'd never been down like this before. At home, she let the tears flow. Daughter, what's wrong? Mom ran into the room. Nothing, please leave me alone, she begged. No, I want to know why my daughter is crying. She crouched on the edge of the bed. He turned out to be just like everyone else, cried the girl. Calm down, there's no reason to suffer over them like that, stroked her head the woman. Mom, you don't understand, nothing could help her that night. Her mother brought her some warm milk, which she drank and went to bed. She went to school in the morning, then came home, and never went out again. She really didn't want to see Arthur. But when she didn't come to the yard, the guy thought he should go to her himself. He knocked on the door, waited a long time to be opened. Elizabeth appeared on the threshold. Hello, can I talk to Maddie? He asked her. No, the mother replied. Why? He didn't understand. You hurt her badly yesterday and she doesn't want to communicate with you today, the woman said. Since I had hurt her, just didn't want to get involved in their fight and that was it. He looked inside the apartment but didn't see Maddie there. She said you broke up, the woman was looking for something in her bag. Just, call her and that's it, the young man insisted. Okay, she went to the room where Maddie was, told her everything. The girl went out onto the landing, closing the door behind her. Why are you doing this? Arthur asked her. That's it, you can go to your Nadia, you and I are no longer together, she answered him. It was sad to hear, but there was nothing left to do, and Arthur just left. They broke up, Maddie suffered, but soon the learning process, dance class, and everything else squeezed the sadness out of her. She still went out with the girls. Arthur tried to approach her once more at the disco, but she didn't want to be with him. And then he disappeared from the city, nobody saw him or knew where he was. So, to the store. The father looked at his daughter. Yes, she nodded her head. Maddie was finishing 11th grade, so she needed to buy a nice dress and shoes. Oh, I can't even believe school is behind us, the woman said to her daughter. I can't believe it myself, she admitted honestly. Okay, enough about that, come on, pick out a dress, Michael pointed to the rows of beautiful, evening gowns. Maddie did nothing but change dresses and twirl in front of the mirror. They all looked good on her, but she chose the one she thought was the prettiest. At the graduation, they all stood together. Teachers and the principal congratulated them and said some words of encouragement. After that they moved to the hall, where the tables were already set. When the fun was in full swing, a friend pushed Maddie in the side. She looked up and saw Arthur walking toward them. Can I talk to you? He came up to the girls. No, she said and turned away. She didn't want to talk to him or see him at all. Why you don't want to socialize? I don't understand at all why things fell apart with you then. He wouldn't leave, he insisted on his own. Okay, let's go. Maddie left the table and walked with Arthur toward the exit. She didn't want to get into it in front of everyone. Outside? He clarified. Yes, she nodded. They walked out of the school. Tell me, why aren't we together? He asked. What are you talking about? It's been so many years and you show up and ask why we're not together. She was very surprised. All this time I remembered you, wanted us to be together. He wanted to hug the girl. I forgot to ask. She didn't look at the guy. Give me a chance, he pleaded. Come back tomorrow, maybe something will work out. She walked back to where everyone else was. But Arthur didn't wait until tomorrow. He saw all the graduates begin to board the bus. He knew where they were going. There was a sunrise meeting ahead. Maddie, he approached her from behind. God, why scare him like that? She turned to him. I love you, and I want to be with you. He hugged the girl. At that moment, she gasped. It was so beautiful, the dawn was just beginning, and here he was, confessing his love. Okay, let's try again, she smiled. Arthur said nothing. He kissed her shoulder, then her neck. Mom, I'm home, she came the next day. That was a nice walk. She saw her daughter's makeup smudged a little. What's your view? She pointed to her face. I need to tell you something. Maddie went into the room and started to change. Something serious? The woman tensed up. Arthur and I are back together again. She didn't turn around. What? Why do you need him? You know what I heard about him. My mom couldn't believe it, because they say you can't walk into the same river twice. You know, until you step on your own rake, nothing works. My daughter was in her pajamas. She was going to get some sleep. Michael, can you imagine? They're back together. The wife went out into the other room, and she was saying this to her husband. Stay out of it, things could happen fast now, he warned. You know what Leslie told me about him? She sat down next to him. And what is it? He was ready to listen. He uses not only alcohol, but a lot of other things, Elizabeth whispered. Oh, it's all your gossip. Michael couldn't believe it. Okay, we'll see what happens. Elizabeth wanted her daughter to be happy. She needed to enroll, but, because of her meetings with her boyfriend, she didn't want to leave this town. Let's go together, she suggested to her. Are you serious? She was so excited, she was ready to go anywhere. They lived together, and Arthur did drink a lot, bringing strange people home with him. Maddie didn't like it, but she kept quiet because she loved Arthur and didn't want to fight with him. Where are you going at night? She asked him as he was about to leave. It's none of your business. He'd leave, come back in the morning, and when Maddie pestered for an explanation, lie to her. Sometimes the girl complained to her mother. She cried, told her to leave him. But Maddie couldn't. She loved this man so much that she stayed with him. If this keeps up, it won't be long before we break up, she warned him. Come on, he was hugging a girl. You'll see, she threatened him with her finger. Arthur was afraid that the girl would leave him, because the apartment they lived in was rented by her father. Therefore, after they fought, the guy took all measures to make up. Once Arthur decided to relax a little, went to a bar, which was not far from home. He went to the bar, where another young man was sitting. Can I have a drink? Arthur asked the bartender. Of course, replied the man. Is it bad, too? The one who was sitting there asked him. Don't you get it? Arthur moved toward him. Austin, the stranger held out his hand. Arthur, the man replied. Pleasantly, the young man was dressed normally. He was sitting there just drinking. At that moment Arthur was also poured. He lifted the glass and looked at his new acquaintance. Come on, cheers to us, Austin said. They started talking, all the while drinking. What's your problem? Arthur asked the young man. Oh, that's a long story, he grumbled and waved it away. It's hard to sit here alone and pour. He looked at the counter where one glass after another was being placed. Very much so, exhaled the man. Tell, was ready to listen and support already almost a friend. What's to tell, we were living normally, and then it started. He took the glass again. With his wife? Arthur clarified. Yep, he looked off in the distance. More people had come into the bar. So what, you cheated? The guy was pulling words out of Austin. I was a regular guy then, I was in college, I knew a lot of things, and I knew how to do a lot of things, Austin began his story. I see, Arthur prepared to listen. Bethany had come to pick up some paperwork. We bumped into each other in the hallway, everything fell out of her hands, and I sat down to help her pick it up. One of the forms said something about oil deposits, I wondered, asked, at which point Austin stopped talking, he decided to wet his throat again. Wow, were they oil tycoons? Arthur was all ears now. You could say that, but I didn't know it at the time, I had only seen the papers. Our institute specialized just on this topic, so I was interested. I began to tell what I knew, and Bethany walked on and smiled. As it turned out later, she only works with documentation, and doesn't understand anything about it. Austin shook his head. Wow, like a fairy tale, Arthur gazed mesmerized at his new acquaintance. That's what I thought at the time. We met, he asked me out. I don't know who liked me better, her father or herself, but from that moment on, I was part of their family. He puckered his lips as if remembering something. Why the father? I didn't understand the interlocutor. He was sick of his job. Once he got a half-empty well, as many people thought. But he developed it, dug next to it, and there was oil. He's been in business ever since. I knew a lot about the subject, we talked to him for hours a day. And then he told his daughter that I was perfect for marriage. Austin sighed heavily. And you got married? Arthur guessed. Yeah, we started living together, working with my dad. I thought Bethany and I were made for each other, that we'd always be together, never be apart. And she did this to me. He took another sip. What did you do? Now Arthur was very interested in the story. As long as I was a simple guy, she loved me, and then everything changed. We started working, I started having money. We built a house, bought everything we needed. One day I came home and she was making out with our driver, and it looked like Austin was about to cry. Wow, shook his head at his new buddy. That's what I thought, too, and I asked her to come to her senses and come back. And she said I'd become like her father. So, 7 years of our marriage went down the drain. He took the glass and drank it all down. They exchanged phone numbers. Austin promised to keep in touch with him and to get him a job. As Austin had had enough, he went home. Arthur volunteered to walk him home, but it seemed that a car was waiting for him. That's it, come on, I'll call you tomorrow, he told his new friend. When he got home he told Maddie nothing. She looked at her husband, who was staggering from side to side. She didn't talk to him, she just went to bed. Arthur sat there thinking how he could get money out of his new boyfriend. I'm off to study, she told him this morning, got dressed and left, doesn't even know if he heard her not. The couple's relationship was very strained. Maddie was even beginning to think that her mother was right when she told her that this guy was no match for her. Hi, at this point Arthur dialed Austin's number. Hello, the man remembered who was calling him. You promised to think about getting me a job, the young man reminded him. Yes, he agreed, only because he always kept his promise, come to my office. Arthur was very cheerful, he walked, and on the way he thought, just to get a grip, and then he would think of something. Hello, a well-dressed man greeted him. Hello, for some reason, Arthur's getting agitated. Come in, I have something for you, he opened the door for him. Okay, thanks, he was trying to be polite. They sat and talked for a long time, and at the end Austin said that he was taking Arthur into production as a specialist. It was a happy thing. They said goodbye, and Arthur went home. Maddie, I got a job, he told the girl. I congratulate you, she said cheerlessly. Why so sluggish? He stood up and walked over to her. Don't, she already knew what he was going to start doing. Okay, look, don't regret it later, and he left the house again. Maddie breathed a sigh of relief, she didn't know what to do with this relationship. Arthur went to work, he asked his boss to walk with him. It was for a reason, he wanted everyone to see who had brought him here. "This is where you'll be working," Austin showed me. "Well, who's going to explain it to me?" "Only ask the new employee." "Ask the boys," he pointed to the brigade. "Thank you," they shook hands, and Austin went off to his room. "So, men, come on, explain to me." Arthur wanted to understand the principle of what would have to be done. They started showing him one thing and another. Everything was easy and clear. Now he started coming here every day. But, not much time passed when the young man started to get more and more absent from work. "Okay, you do this and you do that," he commanded. "Why should you do it? You should be doing it," other workers resented. "You want me to tell Austin what you guys are really doing here?" He called his boss that on purpose to show how close friends they were. The guys were afraid of losing their jobs, so they did what they were told. In the evening, Arthur went straight into his boss's office. "What do you say we hit the bar?" He'd sit down on a chair. "You know, I'm a little busy today." He didn't know how to tell the man to leave. "Today I saw your workers taking something out of the territory," Arthur said, as if in passing. "What exactly?" The supervisor tensed. He often saw that there were fewer new parts than there should be. "I don't know, but they were still talking about it afterwards," realized the young man had hit the mark. "Okay, can you show me who?" Austin got up from the table. "Sure," agreed the guy. Maybe the boys were really taking something out of the territory, no one knew, but when Arthur pointed them out and they were punished, they were now avoiding him. "Remember when you asked me to go to the bar?" Austin met Arthur after work. "Yeah, he was waiting for the warden to call him." "You can today," he pointed to the car. Arthur slowed down on purpose. He wanted more workers to get out of the factory, and then defiantly got into his friend's car. "So, back to where we met?" Austin looked at him. "Come on." Arthur didn't care where they went as long as they got close to the money. He'd been getting paid for a long time and doing nothing himself. As soon as someone complained about someone or said something that would expose the employees, Austin would immediately punish or fire them. "Congratulations to you." Raised his glass to the boss. "With what?" The comrade didn't understand. "With us working together," the man smiled. "Ah, yes, come on," they chugged, and drank. After that, the friends sat and chatted about many things, and then decided to disperse. When everyone came to production the next day, many were summoned to the director's office. Some of them were fired, others were reprimanded. "Why do we have to keep quiet?" one asked the other in the corridor. "Exactly, we've already been fired, what's the use of hiding it?" The man rushed back into the office. "You and I have it all figured out." Austin looked at the entrance. "No, we have a statement," they said firmly. "Speak." The chief was ready to listen. "Do you know what your protege does all day long?" one of them asked. "You mean Arthur?" Austin couldn't understand. "About himself," they confirmed. "What's he doing?" I wanted to hear what the employees had to say now. "He walks around, commands, does nothing, makes us do nothing, and then tells you things that didn't really happen, slings like a machine gun man." "I don't believe you." "Arthur is a good man." "Didn't believe them, boss." "And you watch," the men advised him, and left the office. "I don't understand anything." Austin looked out the window. In the evening, he called his friend again for a sit-down. Of course, he wouldn't tell him anything, but he wanted to see how and what he was doing. "Come to my place, I'll introduce you to my girlfriend," Arthur said. "Oh, let's not today, I didn't want to go like this, Austin." "What are you talking about? Let's go." The guy put up his hand. Good, Austin couldn't turn him down again. They got into the car and drove off. They stopped at Artur's house and went to the entrance. "Are you sure you'll be comfortable?" Austin was worried, he didn't want to disturb people. "It's all right," Arthur assured him. They walked into the apartment. Maddie was surprised, wanting to kick him out at first. But when she saw Austin, she realized he wasn't going to stay with her boyfriend until morning. "Hello," he told her. "Hello," Arthur repeated after his superior. "Come in," she pointed toward the kitchen. "Why didn't you go to your room, or did you clean up again?" He started to step on her. That had never happened before, so Maddie's face stretched. "Why do you do that?" The guest looked at him judgmentally. "She didn't deserve any other way," Arthur assured him. "Come on," Austin felt ashamed, even though he wasn't the one saying those words. The host set a table in front of the couch, and they sat down. Maddie started carrying snacks from the kitchen, and anything else Arthur asked for. "Thank you," Austin liked the girl. She didn't say anything, just walked back and forth. "Have a seat with us," he asked her. "No thanks," she looked at him. "Don't you get it?" Arthur shouted. "Why are you doing this? Do you want to seem cool or the master of life?" Austin didn't understand. "And that she refuses when respectable people ask," he shrugged as if he had nothing to do with it. "If you don't want to, you don't have to do it." After saying that, Maddie left for the kitchen. "I'll be right back," her boyfriend said, and followed her. "What?" She turned to him as he entered the kitchen and closed the doors. "Is it okay what you've done here?" he hissed. "How?" She couldn't understand what had happened to him. "I need this man." "Got it, so, you're going to come and sit with us like a sweetheart right now?" He grabbed her hand. "I'm not going anywhere." She wanted to pull free, but she couldn't. "You'll sleep with him if I want you to." He squeezed his hand tighter. "It hurts," she shrieked. "What's going on in here?" Austin walked into the kitchen. "Back off," Arthur shouted in his heart. "What?" The warden was stunned. "Oh, I'm sorry, I've got it together." He let go of Maddie's hand. Austin could see that there were purple marks on it. "Let me see." He held out his hand. Arthur stood looking at them. Anger raged inside, but he didn't show it. "That's no way to behave," Austin muttered. "That's what I'm telling her," said Arthur. "I'm the one who told you." The chief turned to him. "Oh, I see, what are you looking at?" Mocking. "The guy attacked his girlfriend again." "Okay, that's enough, get ready today, he won't leave you alone." He glared at Maddie. "Is that comfortable?" She didn't realize what was going on. "Yeah." He went into the hallway to put his shoes on. Maddie didn't bother to argue with anyone, she followed Austin's example. "If you leave now, you may not come back," Arthur shouted after them. "If you don't stop now, you may not come to work," Austin told him quietly but firmly. "That's it," I realized. The young man stopped. Austin and Maddie went outside. He showed her to the car. "I can't, he'll kill me later." Maddie was shocked by everything that was happening. "It's going to be okay." They got in and drove. Was he planning all this? Maddie couldn't understand. "I don't know, I don't think so," Austin said honestly. They arrived at the house, where a man escorted her to the door. He showed her where she could stay. "You are so good to me," she thanked and went to her room. Maddie couldn't lie down, couldn't sit, and waited until morning to go home. But she couldn't stand it either. She went out, and it was still dark outside. "Where are you going?" Austin asked her, sitting downstairs, reading something. Ouch. She was scared. I don't think it turned out well. She was standing up, she was embarrassed in general. No, everything was fine. He got up to see the girl off. If Arthur had gone to bed after they left, he should be in a normal state by now. "Thank you," she said for the 100th time today. "Handle it," he smiled. The driver got her home in a matter of minutes. She entered the apartment and started packing. "Where are you going?" Arthur asked the girl. "What do you think?" She held out her hand, which had huge bruises on it. "Sorry," he tilted his head. "I can't, I've never seen you like this." She continued doing what she was doing. "Maddie, marry me," he knelt before her. Are you crazy, yelling and grabbing at night and now you're proposing? She couldn't keep up with her young man's mood swings. Please, I love you, I'm jealous, I'm crazy about this. He was still standing in front of her. Standing up, she held out her arms to him, they embraced. After that they went to their room and went to bed together. So, how are things at home? Austin asked me this morning at work. It's okay, I apologized, she forgave, we do this a lot, he didn't make eye contact. Somehow I didn't notice it, Austin said honestly. Okay, I'm going to the shop. Arthur left the office. He was so angry, he wanted to take it out on someone. He started yelling at the workers, who, as usual, they didn't say a word. But what the boy didn't know was that cameras had been installed all around the factory at night. It would keep anything out, and also, Austin could watch Arthur work. Austin wanted to see something he could charge the young man for. He thought back to the ride with Mady yesterday. He liked that girl so much, how could she live with someone like Arthur? Hey, he came home, she was waiting for him with dinner. Come in. Mady didn't know how it was that she hadn't seen the real Arthur for what he was. Nor could she understand how she could love him after all this. But it was true. Smelling good, he sat down at the table. I tried, they seemed to be doing well. After that, the young man called the girl into the bedroom. There he made himself comfortable on the bed and took a camera in his hands. What are you doing? She asked him. Dance for me, he asked. Are you out of your mind? She couldn't understand. Well, what should you do? He looked at her begrudgingly. Okay, she turned on the music and started moving to the beat, then Arthur turned on the camera. Come on, he encouraged her. I won't be on camera, she stopped. What's the big deal, as a memento, I'll look at how beautiful my wife was later, he begged. Okay, she laughed. After that, Mady danced while undressing. Strangely enough, but she got so carried away that she forgot about the camera. After the incendiary dances, the girl climbed into bed, where there was a favorite man, then they briefly lay embraced, and fell asleep. This went on almost every night. Arthur, come to my place, Austin called to the young man. Okay, now, he was in a hurry. How are you doing? He said in the study. Why do you ask? Everything is fine, Arthur wondered. It's been a long time since you and I went anywhere, the boss told him. Yeah, that's right, he nodded. How about my place? Austin suggested. Let's go to my place then, Mady will cook something, Arthur volunteered. Very good, I'm sick of these bars, said the warden. That's what he wanted, to see Mady. After work they met and drove to where Arthur lived. They were silent on the way, there was no topic for conversation. Finally, the car stopped, they got out and went to the entrance. Mady had been warned, she came home from work, and immediately started cooking. The pie that Arthur loved so much was made. They went into the apartment and sat down at the table. What a good cook you are, complimented Mady Austin. Thank you, she blushed. Arthur noticed it, his fists clenched, but he didn't show it. How are you doing? The man asked. All being well, it worked out that it was just the two of them talking, Austin and Mady, with Arthur as an extra link, just present. The evening went very well, as Austin got ready to go home, he kissed Maddie's hand. Did you like it? Arthur said angrily as the boss left their apartment. What are you doing? She was afraid he might do something. Nothing, he grabbed her arm, and threw her on the bed. Please stop, she pleaded with him. Now, he went and turned on the camera and then attacked his wife-to-be. Whatever he did to her that night, she just screamed and cried. Hello, Mady, Austin called the next day. Good afternoon, she didn't understand what he wanted, why he was calling. How did it go yesterday when I left? He was really interested in that question. It's okay, she stood in front of the mirror and looked at her face, which had a huge bruise on it. I want to see you, the man insisted. I can't, she knew he was testing her. So it didn't go so well, he guessed. Austin, what did you want? She cried. Are you alone now? He asked first, and then looked at the monitor, where he saw Arthur on the cameras. What was the question? Maddie couldn't understand. I'll be right there, he hung up. Maddie didn't have time to do anything, to think about a plan of action, but the doorbell rang. There was nothing to do but open it. Jesus, the man looked at her, what has he done to you? That's none of your business, she lowered her eyes. Still concerned, he went into the apartment, started packing up her things. What are you doing? She looked up with big eyes. We're going to my place, there's nothing for you to do here, he spoke confidently. What about Arthur? She was worried. I'll deal with him myself, Austin promised. After that, they got into the car and drove to his house. Afterwards, he explained to her where and what to look for, and then went to work. Arthur, I need to talk to you, he summoned him to him. Is your friend calling on you a little too often? Said one of the workers with a sarcastic tone. It's none of your business, the boy shouted at him. He quickly went to the office to go up to the supervisor. Hey, what did you want? He came into the office. Fire you, Austin said in a stern voice. What? The man smirked. What he heard, he couldn't tolerate his superior's tone like that. What did I do? Arthur didn't understand. How about this? Turned Austin's monitor toward him. You can't prove anything, the guy got excited and twitched. I have Maddie now, leave her alone, Austin said calmly. You've decided to take my grandmother for yourself, too? He shook his head, thinking he'd thought it through. Not appropriated, but for now just saved from you, you saw her face, he got up from his seat. $1 million, the young man muttered. What? Austin didn't understand. $1 million and she's yours, not a muscle flinched on Arthur's face. And if I report you for carrying from the factory, he pointed to the monitor. Oh, you, Arthur almost threw himself at him. You can't, Austin shook his head negatively. You go on my terms or your life will be hell, he wasn't shy about anything anymore. Okay, $1 million, and you never even remember her name at all, went to Austin's safe. It was agreed, they shook hands. Austin walked happily out of the boss's office, he called his car, and drove home. There he saw that the bride's things were really gone, rubbed his hands together, and smiled that he decided to wait a couple of days, and then begin to put his plan into action. It wasn't the way he wanted it to go, but since it didn't go according to his plan, he found a loophole that a month passed. Arthur knew that Maddie was still living at Austin's house. That's when he started following the man. Saw him coming to work, dialed Maddie's number. What do you want? She answered after the second beep. Hello, darling, he said in a husky voice. Tell me, she was waiting. Arthur wanted to tell her that her new suitor had just bought her, but then decided against it. I want money, $200,000 every month, he said in a tone that made it impossible to argue with him. Are you crazy? She even laughed. No, but you'll go nuts when your video gets into the wrong hands. You bet I'll get paid for it, he laughed now. Arthur, you won't do that, her voice was strained. You know me, I'd do anything for money, she knew that. Okay, I'll think of something, the girl promised. That's my girl, love you, a month has gone by, exactly on this same date, you have to bring me the full amount, he disconnected. Maddie sat down on the bed, and wrapped her arms around her head. What should she do? She wouldn't be able to ask Austin for that much, what would she tell him, where would she get that kind of money, and even on a monthly basis? The girl thought for the rest of the evening until Austin came home. Hey, he came into her room. Hello, she stood up, and walked over to him. Maddie, let's go out to dinner together, he begged her. Okay, now she had to do whatever it took to get them together. They went down to the first floor and sat down at the table. "Maddie, have you considered us as a couple?" Austen asked her a question head-on. "What about Arthur?" She said it on purpose so he wouldn't think her frivolous. "And that this Arthur seems to me at all like he's gone mad." He began to put garnish on her plate. "Okay, I'll think about your offer." She began to eat. It was so embarrassing that she was deceiving such a good man, but she had no other choice. "That's the answer I like," he smiled. From then on, Austen would leave money for Maddie before he left for work, so she could get to school, buy something for herself. And she, in turn, would take only the crumbs and put the rest away. "Hey," Austen came home. "And I made you some." She was waiting for him downstairs. "Where's Diana?" He looked around, searching for his assistant. "I decided to let her go and cook for you myself." She confessed honestly. "Thank you." He walked over and hugged her for the first time. Maddie didn't resist. "Austen," she looked him in the eye. "What?" He was looking at her, too. "I like you, but I need to get used to it." She was telling the truth. To be honest, she was already confused about where in this house was the truth and where was the lie. When Austen left to take a shower, she saw that he had left his briefcase downstairs. She walked over and opened it. There were papers and money in there. Maddie squirmed. She didn't want to do this, and she didn't, but right now her reputation depended on it. The girl pulled out a few bills, tucked them into her pocket. "What are you doing here?" She just had time to close her briefcase. "Here, I see what a beautiful fireplace you have," she lied, because his bag was standing on top of it. "Would you like us to flood it?" he asked. Of course it wasn't a lie, she really wanted it. Now, Austen's gone somewhere. He went back, put some wood inside, lit a match, and in 1 minute the fire was blazing inside. Beautifully, she sat down in front of him. "What did I say?" He sank to the floor next to the girl. She couldn't take her eyes off the fire. She sat staring at it. In the dancing tongues Maddie saw different pictures. "You're beautiful." Austen put his hand on her knee. "Thank you." She was mesmerized by what was happening. Austen got up, went to the bar, poured wine glasses, brought them to the girl. "I want you to have the same feelings for me that you have for Arthur." He clinked his glass against hers, took a sip. She did too. After that he started kissing her. Maddie was embarrassed at first. Austen saw this, stopped. "No, go on." She turned and hugged him. "You are the most wonderful girl." He touched her lips. In the morning, when Austen wasn't home, she counted all the money she had. The money she had was a couple thousand short, but Maddie thought it would be enough. She went to the place where they'd agreed to meet Arthur. "Here, give me the records." She handed him the money. "You found a fool. Now you're going to carry me this much every month." He laughed. "You what? Where am I going to get them for you?" She looked at him with big eyes. "Pleasure your new lover more often. He'll give it to you. Turn around and go." Maddie stood there, feeling as if she had been doused with a slop that would never be cleaned off. She went home, and again she sat and thought. Why so sad? Austen came up to her. "No, it's okay." She hugged and kissed him. Now Maddie knew where the man's money lay. She could have taken it without hindrance, but she didn't want to. What are we gonna do? Every night they found something to do. Let's take a walk. She just wanted to live, not think about something bad every day. Whatever you say. He took her hand and they walked out of the house. This evening went as wonderfully as all the others. Austen and Maddie's relationship had been slow to develop. Every month she carried money to Arthur, saved some, took some without asking. It was so disgusting when you cheated someone who was already close to you. 6 months later, Austen and Maddie were living soul to soul. "Will you marry me?" he asked. "No," she turned away and cried. "You what?" He didn't realize what was going on. "I couldn't tell." She didn't look at him. When she met Arthur once again, she told him everything. He calls me to wife, I can't marry him while I cheat, she begged him to give her the tape. It's a gold mine, as a wife you'll be able to bring in more, he rejoiced. Maddie looked at the man she once loved. His eyes were crazy and his laugh was the same. I can't, she screamed. Then admire your ass on all the screens, he pointed to her pocket. Well, please leave me alone, she cried. And you thought of me, he walked in the opposite direction from her. Maddie came home, her mood was serious. She was waiting for the one she felt good about, even loved, to come home, but she was afraid to admit it to herself. Hi, sweetheart, he hugged her. Hello, she hid her eyes from him. What's wrong with you? Austin couldn't understand. I can't tell you that, Maddie said. You try it, he crouched down, and set her down next to him. Okay, she took in more air into her lungs. I am ready to hear everything, and will accept any truth from you, he told her. I'm so embarrassed, she couldn't, her voice kept breaking, and Maddie would shut up. My love, speak, he pleaded. Arthur, she began. What? Who's Arthur? You're hanging out with him, the man was shocked. Yes, she lowered her head even lower. I can't believe after everything he did to you, Austin even stood up. When we lived with him, he often filmed me dancing and then what happened in bed, she blurted it out so fast that some of the words just got lost. And what? I couldn't understand the man. When you took me away, he called a few days later and started blackmailing me with it, told me to give him money, I'm sorry, she cried. Nothing, tell me what happened next, he moved closer to her and gave her a hug. I didn't know where to get the finances, I couldn't ask you, so I adjusted from the ones you were leaving me, and, she couldn't say the next sentence. And you took it without asking, he finished, you thought I wouldn't notice, but if you need it, it's no shame. She raised swollen and crying eyes to him. I'm sorry, she roared again. It's okay, don't think about anything else or cry, he hugged her and kissed her. Maddie couldn't believe it had gone like this, there hadn't been any fighting or arguing or anything like that. My love, will you be my wife? He asked again his main question. What about the shoot? She couldn't understand, she didn't want anyone to see her. It'll be okay, I told you, so I'll fulfill my words, he kissed her again. If so, of course I agree, she snuggled against his chest, realized that with this man she had nothing to worry about at all. The very next day, Austin had hired people to track down Arthur, take his camera, and all the tapes and flash drives. By now, he definitely didn't have any dirt. But he didn't stop there. Apparently there was money, now he'd already hired surveillance on Austin and Maddie. He was mad about it, realized things weren't going his way. Hey, he hissed, when Maddie arrived, she would run back to the car, get in it, and sit like that until Austin arrived, who would walk her back to the auditorium. Austin, he's lost his mind, she told her future husband. It's okay, we'll deal with it somehow, he always knew how to calm her down. I'm scared, what if he shows up at our wedding, she feared and expected anything from this man. Let him try. But the gala had to be postponed. Because Arthur forged some documents and passed them off as being from Austin's firm. They started checking him out, dragging him through the courts. Good thing he had a great lawyer who got the whole thing cleared up fast. Now Arthur was being sought not only by Austin's trackers, but also by law enforcement. Well, I guess it's okay now that they moved up the wedding date. Okay, Maddie stopped being afraid, too. They invited many friends, acquaintances and relatives. There he is, the man I've always told you about, her mother pointed at her son-in-law. Thank you, Mommy, for everything, her daughter hugged her. You're welcome, love, the important thing is that you're doing well, they're happy. The wedding was over, Austin couldn't be happy to have such a woman. So, do you want to go somewhere or fly? He asked her. No, I'm fine with you here, she wouldn't take a step away from her lover. Austin took a vacation, he decided to leave all business and devote himself to the woman he loved. Those weeks flew by quickly, but it was like a fairy tale. Austin had so much unspent love that he gave it all to Maddie. "Where were you before? Why didn't you take it from him sooner?" She was snuggling in his arms. If he had known, he would have taken her. He held her so tightly in his arms, and knew he would never, ever let her go. A couple months later, Maddie was meeting her husband at the door. "What's wrong with you?" He smiled. "I feel like someone's about to become a daddy." She looked at him. "I don't believe it." He lifted her in his arms. "Believe me." She put her arms around his neck. "Lord, not only have you given me the most beautiful woman, but she will also give me an heir." He couldn't believe it. Things don't work out that well. Pregnancy was difficult. Maddie was not well. Several times the medics were called to her. "What is it?" She didn't understand. Her mom told her that when she was pregnant with her, she was fine. She didn't feel anything. "It happens," that's all the medic answered her. Good, Maddie was patient. She wanted to make her chosen one happy so badly that she could endure and endure anything. She did it steadfastly for all 9 months, and now, she's being wheeled into the hospital. Their baby boy is about to be born. "Breathe," was all she heard through the intense pain. "What am I doing?" She couldn't even breathe. Every movement brought pain. "Come on," shouted the midwife. "Nah," exhaled the girl. She thought she was going to die while she was giving birth to this baby. And suddenly, there was such relief. No pain, nothing else. There was dead silence in the room. Maddie even raised herself on her elbows. And at that moment there was a shrill cry from the baby. A baby girl. Put her on her mother's chest. "Fiona," whispered Maddie. Such a pretty name. The nurse was standing next to me. "Like a little angel," the mother explained. "She does look like him." The woman picked up the girl, wrapped her in a diaper, and carried her away. Maddie lay there for a while longer, and then Austin came to see her. He had been told, and he rushed to his favorite girls. "Congratulations, my love," he leaned over his wife. "Thank you," she kissed him. "You're beautiful," he corrected her bonnet. "Joke, it's already okay." She realized he was doing it on purpose to make her forget. They'd been moved to a room Austin had paid for, and it was state-of-the-art. But Maddie didn't want any of that. She wanted to be home as soon as possible. And now they are on their way to the place where they are loved and waited for, Maddie smiling and holding her baby girl in her arms. Austin, of course, had made all the arrangements. He couldn't have done it any other way. Maddie walked into the nursery and gasped. Everything was so beautiful, especially for their baby girl. "Honey, you did such a good job." She kissed him again and again. "I'm off to work." It's been 2 months since the baby girl was born. Maddie was doing everything she could to make her daughter feel good. The grandparents came to visit, but Maddie said she was going to do everything on her own. So they just visited and left. Austin was so proud of his wife that he couldn't even put it into words. "I'm going for a walk with my daughter," she told her husband. Good, he wasn't worried, because Maddie always walked the local trails, and never strayed far from home. This day she went out, walked the same route she always did. Then she remembered that she had to go to the local store. The saleswoman asked for the number of a manicurist. She looked around for someone to leave with the stroller. Then she thought that nothing would happen in a minute. She left her daughter by the porch, walked in quickly, put her business card on the counter, and immediately walked out. She looked in the stroller, her daughter, wrapped in a blanket, sleeping peacefully. "Let's go home," Maddie said quietly, and went back to the trails. She walked, humming to herself, looking ahead to where their house was already in sight. She walked through the gate and up to the porch. The guard offered to bring the stroller home with the baby, but Maddie refused. She would bring her daughter home herself. The girl opened the lid of the stroller, took out the baby in a blanket. She thought it was light, opened the corner, and there, instead of the baby, there were some rags. "Fiona," screamed her mother so loudly that all the guards ran out. Austin ran out as well. "Maddie, what happened?" He leaned over her. "My daughter," she was sitting on her lap beside the stroller. "Urgently, call everyone," the man ordered. "Now, there's so much movement going on, a fly wouldn't fly by. Whoever did it couldn't have gone far, there are guards here, he wouldn't have gotten by car, so on foot, and through the woods," concluded the man in uniform who had just arrived. "What are we standing around for? We need to run over there and comb through," shouted the woman. She was ready to run wherever we needed to go. "Should we leave the mother at home?" the representative of the law asked. "No, Austin, I want to go with you, don't leave me alone," she begged. "Okay, she's coming with us," he agreed. Together they all walked toward the woods that started at the edge where the last houses were. And the one who had done all this was not going to run far away. As soon as the people entered the forest, he heard their voices and began to make noise himself, so that he would be found sooner. "I think the sounds are coming from over there," one of the policemen pointed with his hand. "Come on," he looked at the girl's mother and father. "Hurry up," Maddie urged them all. They made their way through some brushwood and found themselves on a ledge, or hill. Maddie almost fainted when she saw Arthur standing there, his little girl in his arms. "What do you want?" Austin asked what he thought was an important question for this man. "Revenge," the man answered honestly. "Arthur, you wouldn't dare," began to beat hysterically Maddie. "Do you doubt it?" He lifted the child over his head. "No need to provoke him," one of the men in uniform asked. "Please, you want me to go with you, but don't do anything to the baby," knelt Maddie. "I don't need anything from you," he laughed his terrible laugh, and leaned back so far that it looked like he was about to fall. What then? What was the point of all this? No one understood. "You don't know how bad and painful it was for me, now I want you to feel the same way. Try to feel what I felt," and there's that laughter again. "He's crazy," concluded most of those present. That is, Maddie saw one of the men pick up a pebble from the ground and go somewhere behind the ledge. She was wary of what he was up to. "Arthur, remember how you and I were friends, how we loved each other," she quietly approached him. "And what, you think that's going to make me feel better?" He looked into her eyes. "I don't know, I thought you really loved me. You think I married Austin to take so much from him that we'd have enough to last us a lifetime," she lied, but her voice didn't even waver once. "Hey," Arthur heard from downstairs. He looked up. At that moment Maddie snatched the blanket from him and the others threw him to the ground. "Oh, you set him up as usual," he was throwing a tantrum. "You wanted to rob me of the most precious thing I have in the world." She walked over to her husband, who put his arms around her. "That's it, let's go home," he told Maddie. She lifted the corner, her daughter looking at her. "It's okay," she whispered and kissed her. They returned home more or less calmly, but Maddie could not forget this incident for a long time, now walked with the child only at home. How did Arthur's case end? She didn't go to any meetings, she didn't care, as long as he never came into their lives again. He's been committed to a psychiatric hospital, so he won't be out of there anytime soon, if ever. Good thing it ended that way. She sat next to the crib where their baby girl was sniffling. "Yes, come here," he held out his arms to her. Maddie stood up, walking over to her husband. "Do you know how much your Arthur valued you at?" Austin finally decided to confess. "Did he sell me out?" She couldn't believe it. "Yeah, me for $1 million, he pressed her against him. "Somehow cheaply sizing me up," she laughed. "I was willing to give whatever amount he named because I liked you even then." He kissed the woman who made him happy. "I'm glad to hear that, I hope you're not selling me out." She laughed. "Not for any money in the world," he hugged her tighter. Fiona was crying in the crib, her mom needed to feed her. Austin looked at his loved ones, and only admired them. "You're embarrassing me," she looked at her husband. "You should know how beautiful it is." He got up and left the room.